Thank you. Please be seated. Please be seated. I'm Scottish. I like that kind of stuff. Good evening. Bienvenue. Bindigin. My name is Ashley Thompson. I'm from the library. On behalf of the organizers, I'm thrilled that you can be with us for Margaret Atwood's last birthday party, at least till last year. Have you guys been drinking? At least at Laurentian. It's in my text. For as she said, so you're probably wondering, why is this her last birthday party? Well, she said in correspondence with us, all good things must come to an end. I'd particularly like to welcome Miss Atwood, who's back again with us this year, and as well as a special welcome to our Chancellor, Dr. Steve Paikin, sitting right beside her. Welcome as well to those of you in the audience who've been integral to the success of this celebration in the past, including some of you who provided entertainment. A number of you have also come from afar. I understand that some of you are from Barrie, others from Ottawa. We also have in our audience Dr. Laurie Anne Duchec-Renville, an Atwood specialist in the Department of Études Anglophones, Université de Caen, Basse-Normandie, France. And yes, I was going to ask you to give her a warm welcome, but you've already done that. Unfortunately, we've also received a few regrets. Graham Gibson, Miss Atwood's partner, has been a regular at this event, is unable to make it this year, and we hope you'll express our regrets. In addition, a couple of my colleagues in the School of Social Work can't be with us because they've committed themselves to be in a panel discussion on third world sanitation, being held tonight at the Public Library. All this because the United Nations has designated November the 19th of each year as World Toilet Day. This is World Toilet Day. The reference to the panel discussion reminds me of one of Margaret Atwood's jokes about Canadians. On the road to, have you heard this one? On the road to heaven, there are two signs. One says heaven, the other says panel discussion on heaven. And all the Canadians go to the second one. I was just thinking it's good that we don't have a panel discussion on Margaret Atwood tonight. Maybe none of you would be here, I don't know. Let me now welcome to the stage Laurentian's President and Vice Chancellor Dominique Giroux. I note there are some comments about his presidency by the editor of Lambda, our student newspaper, in this week's issue. After observing Laurentian's rise in the recent Maclean's rating, the editorial reviews the slew of changes that have occurred since Mr. Giroux arrived as president in April 2009. The editorial concludes that it is obvious that Dominique Giroux is improving this university for the better. From my perspective, this is an understatement. Having worked in the library for nearly 40 years, I am proud to state publicly that the president has been the most consequential president we have ever had. More good things have happened to this place since his arrival than at any other time in our history. Please welcome Laurentian's President and Vice Chancellor, Dominique Giroux.
Thank you very much, Ashley, for these kind words. And no, I did not write Ashley's script. Bonsoir, Annie, Bojo, Kwekwe. Merci beaucoup d'être ici si nombreux ce soir. As you know, this is a special edition of Margaret Atwood's birthday event, special and somewhat bittersweet. L'événement de cette année donne suite à la tradition créée à la Laurentienne en 2005, où des collègues ont tenu un repas sur le thème de Margaret Atwood au domicile d'un des membres du corps professoral du département d'English. Et pour ce repas, il y avait un gâteau, Edible Woman, et des mets préparés de recettes recommandées par Mme Atwood dans The Candlelit Food Book, un livre de recettes qu'elle avait compilé et illustré aussi. Dans les années qui ont suivi, les célébrations d'anniversaire de Mme Atwood ont pris de l'ampleur, ayant lieu dans de plus grandes salles, et ont compris des lectures théâtrales, des spectacles, de la musique et de la danse. This is the culmination of this exceptional 10-year tradition, 10 years of hosting celebrations of one of the world's most renowned thinkers and literary talents. And over the course of this decade, we at Laurentian have had the good fortune to spend a lot of quality time with Margaret and with Graham. We've had the occasion to get to know one another, to share ideas, and even to sip a little scotch. And I'll admit, Laurentian has been known to brag a little bit now and then about this very special friendship. So we're delighted to have had these years of celebration with you, Margaret. You've inspired our students, you've energized our university community, and you've enriched every one of us. We're certain that tonight's event will be memorable, and yes, it's the last Sudbury celebration of the birthday, Ashley, and a fitting way to mark the occasion. Many of you know that Laurentian University Chancellor Steve Paikin is pretty much the most adept and skillful interviewer you will find anywhere. So we're very happy to have him steering the conversation tonight. And as you know, our Chancellor is an avid user of social media. So if you see him using his BlackBerry on stage, he's not doing work emails, he's likely tweeting about the event, using the hashtag Atwood, LUL, for Laurentian University Laurentian. So if you want to tweet your comments, reactions, questions, I'm sure our Chancellor will retweet some of them later on tonight. So I want to thank both Margaret and Steve for being here tonight for this special evening. And also like to thank all of those who have worked on tonight's event and the many who have contributed to all of the Margaret Atwood events over the past few years. And I want to thank you, dear guests and colleagues in the audience who've spent many of these happy evenings with us in mid-November's past. Je vous souhaite une très belle soirée en agréable compagnie avec notre invité spécial et avec notre chancelier. Chimigwech.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a tradition at these events, dating back for at least 2 years, that before the... It's true, though. That before the main event, we celebrate local talent by hearing from our city's poet laureate. This year, we're fortunate that Tom Leduc is here. Tom works for Wajax Industrial Components by day and has been developing his writing and poetry in his spare time over the past 7 years. In 2012, Tom won the Valley Living with Lake Center Poetry Contest with his poem, My Northern Lake. He's planning as part of his legacy project for this position to work with young people in the community and encourage and support children and youth with writing, including poetry. Please welcome Tom Leduc.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be a part of this evening's events. As a poet laureate, I was asked to write a poem for this evening, so I did in honor of Margaret. For you. Rare bird. The appeal of her calling inspires us to sit up straight. She insists we pay attention, take notice, and listen to the birds, to the trees, to ourselves and our future. She sets a feather to the skin of our imagination and tickles possibilities. Images lift off the page, reflections of a diverse country struggling to find its stride and take flight. Wrapped in a quilt stitched by her words, we find ourselves curled up in our nests by the fireplace, hot beverage by our side, settled in and ready to entertain worlds of realistic fiction through the eyes of a rare bird.
Well, tonight we're in for a real treat. We have in front of us, or at least I have in front of me, a man who has for over 30 years interviewed prime ministers, premiers, politicians, poets, and presidents of universities. I didn't get a chance to ask him whether he's ever interviewed librarians. Well, we're interesting too, you know. We also have a woman who's been interviewed probably more than any author alive, starting back in 1967. And she's slowly evolved into one of Canada's national treasures. In fact, she's so well known around the world that she's frequently mistaken for an American. And she continues to produce. Listen to this. This year alone, she released The Stone Mattress, her 55th book and 9th story collection. She was tapped to retell The Tempest for Penguin Random's House Hogarth Shakespeare series. She wrote a story for the future. Did you hear about this one? She wrote a story for the Future Library Project, which will remain unseen for 100 years. She wrote a libretto for a new chamber opera about 19th century Mohawk poet Pauline Johnson, which premiered at Vancouver's York Theatre, to great applause, I'm told. She collaborated with She collaborated with artist Christian Ward on a comic book adaptation of The Handmaid's Tale for the British Library. That makes sense. She secured the final patent for the long pen, Atwood's robotic autographing device. You know, when I first heard about the long pen, I remember Conrad Black was using it. People were signing it at the world's biggest bookstore in Toronto, and at the time Conrad Black was in prison, so I thought that gave new meaning to the phrase long pen. And this is my favorite. Like, what is it about this woman? She worked with Beau's Brewery to produce Mad Adamite's New Brew, a limited edition Groot Ale but wait, there's more. Incorporating botanicals referenced in her novel Mad Adam. They both have a lot in common, actually. Both are graduates of Victoria College at the U of T. Both live in Toronto. Both are authors. And I couldn't resist. I know many of you will be seeing this thing tonight later on, but I thought you should know that our Chancellor has recently published his 5th book called Paikin and the Premiers, which is available at Chapters for $26.99, but I understand you can get a discount if you ask. Say you've been at this event. Get this, both have honorary doctorates from Laurentian, both blog, and both tweet. In fact, recently Steve Paikin tweeted, "At Margaret Atwood, as I am, talk about pressure. Finding a first question you'll never heard before. Any suggestions?" Well, tweeters did have suggestions, and so did audience members, some of whom filled out cards tonight, which Mr. Paikin will ask for at some point in his conversation. Probably won't be able to get through all of them, but at least he's been assured he'll give it his best shot. So now we're going to find out. What is the first question Mr. Paikin will ask tonight? It's yours.
Thanks, Ashley. No pressure at all. Well, that is the challenge for the woman who's been interviewed more than anybody else in the world. What do you do about this? We did get a few questions suggested from Twitter. Here was one suggestion from Christopher Arnold, who asked, Brussels sprouts, butter or au naturel? Which I thought was not bad, but not perhaps as relevant or germane as we could do on an august occasion like this. So we tried another one. This one was from a Maria, who said, how good is your memory, Margaret? And you actually answered this one. You said, never heard or can't remember hearing. Now that's pretty good too. Sometimes you try so hard to get something brilliant when really what you should just go for is something kind of simple and relevant. So I actually walked around the office and told people what I was going to be doing. And the first question they all asked me is the question I'm going to ask you, which is, you could be anywhere on your birthday over these many years, and yet you come here. Why do you come here to do this? That's the question.
Well, you know, that's a pretty good question. Long, long ago, before you were born, Sudbury did not have any trees. It did not have any fish. It had no birds. It was a barren wasteland. And people decided that they would rather live in a place in which other things were living. So over the years, with much labor, they replanted Sudbury by putting some limestone on the rocks to neutralize the acid.
I'm going to have the best Twitter picture tonight of anybody.
I bet you
Keep
are.
going.
Well,
it's okay.
These are my shark mittens. I'm just letting you know. They were given to me by my U.S. publishers. They've got my number, so you need to behave yourself just a bit.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So Sudbury replanted itself, and it moved itself from being a unit of pollution, as in 2 Sudburys, 3 Sudburys, 4 Sudburys, to being a model of regeneration. And that in itself, I think, would merit, don't you feel, my presence at this event. And besides, they always do something different, and you never know what it's going to be.
Like predicting this will be your last birthday.
That was,
I think actually did. That was different.
Yes, it's like the people say, this is Margaret Atwood's last book. I said, no, wait a minute.
We're going to have, I mean, how do you do an interview with Margaret Atwood? It's complicated. Do you focus on books? Do you focus on her life? What do you do? So we're going to sort of do a smattering of things tonight and do a bit of a look back at your life, do a bit of stuff of current affairs of today. And I haven't told her the questions ahead of time, and it's just going to be spontaneous, and let's see how we do. I want to start by taking you back to the most dignified place where your first book signing happened. The men's underwear and sock department at Hudson's Bay in Edmonton.
That's correct.
That's true, eh?
Yes.
I heard that, and that's really true. What was that like?
It is really true. It was very bizarre. It was the publicist's first week on the job. And I think she thought it was a good spot because it was near the escalator. And I think she thought that the people going up and down would see this young person sitting there with a book called The Edible Woman, surrounded by jockey shorts, and then they come over and buy one. But in fact, it had the opposite effect, and all the gents who had wandered in to get some socks at lunchtime took one look at this and galloped in their galoshes in the opposite direction. So I sold 2 books. It was quite disappointing. But I thought, well, I guess this is what being a professional writer is going to be like, and once you've had the men's sock and underwear department in Edmonton, Alberta, you're basically ready for anything.
After that. Did that Margaret Atwood, selling 2 books that day, ever imagine or hope for what the 75-year-old Margaret Atwood has achieved?
Well, remember, this was a long, long time ago. So that would have been in 1969. And at that time, all of the infrastructure that you see around you today in the publishing, indeed in the entertainment world, none of that existed. Believe it or not, Jack McClelland here in Canada was the first person to invent the book tour. He did it because Canada, as the Arrogant Worms say in their song, Canada's really big. And we didn't have the internet then. In fact, we barely had electric typewriters. We certainly didn't have computers. So he would send writers, he would start them in Halifax and sort of zip them across the country, one city at a time. And other people then picked that up. But there weren't any of these writers' festivals yet or any of that. So all of it was in the future. And as for Canada, we just felt lucky that we were finally able to publish novels, because for a long time it was very hard. And it was very hard because novels are thick. They take lots of paper. They're expensive to produce compared to the little pamphlet of poems that you might crank out in the cellar, which is what we did.
So what was your ambition?
Oh, that was my ambition. I wanted to be a writer, but the question was how to go about it in this situation in which none of the aids and helps that we see around us today existed. We weren't even doing book signings in bookstores yet. It was the men's sock and underwear department.
And you have gone from that to a world in which some days I think I'm pretty cool because I've got 57,000 Twitter followers. And then I remember that Margaret Atwood has 582,000 Twitter followers.
84.
84. Sorry. I didn't check today yet. That's true. That was from yesterday. Why do you spend as much time on Twitter as you do?
Okay, I don't spend a whole lot of time on Twitter because Twitter is quite short. I got into it by accident when I was building a website for the year of the flood. And we did a year of the flood event right here in Edmonton, and it is that year of the flood event with Sudbury actors. Did I say Edmonton?
We knew what you meant.
Yeah, I'm sure. They're both cold. So it's actors from here who are in the film made about that particular book tour, which is called In the Wake of the Flood. So I built the website around that musical and dramatic and bird conservation book tour that we did in 2009. And they said, you need to have a Twitter feed. And I said, what on earth is that? And they said, it's really easy. So that's when I started. And there have been many short forms of writing before Twitter. So there's a long tradition of it. Graffiti, epigrams, parables, haiku, short forms.
Okay, but you don't mind my saying,
telegrams.
There's no other author in the world I know of in your stature who does this. I mean, who is as available to her public as you are through Twitter. And you don't just put stuff out, you respond to people and so on. And
well, Salman Rushdie does it.
As I said,
actually,
in your stature, what do you do about? Because everybody I know on Twitter from time to time gets hateful tweets. What happens when you get those?
Depends what kind of hateful tweets they are.
Okay.
If they're insulting my Twitter followers, I block them. Mm-hmm. They're not allowed to do that.
What if they insult you?
Depends what they're insulting me about. If they're just generally insulting and name calling, that's kind of useless. If they have an issue with something, I'm willing to debate the issue if they're wrong, or even if they're, or even if they're right. And they are very quick to point out if you make a typo or anything like that. They will pile on and go ha ha ha. So there is quite a lot of joking that goes on Twitter as well. But I consider it to be like a little radio program with the same kinds of rules that apply. So if you have a little radio program that you're hosting, it's not there for self-promotion. If you want the billboard, you can do that on your website or Facebook or one of those other places where people go for that kind of information. Twitter is more like a party or a radio show, and what you should really be doing is saying, Steve wrote a pretty interesting book about premiers and himself. So if you're tweeting somebody else's book, it being social media and pretty rapid, you have to get the URL that they push on to get the picture of the book. You can't just name it by name. You've got to give them a link.
I will get down on my knees right now if you tweet out the fact that I wrote that book about the premiers.
Oh, I fully intend to do that.
If
you don't even have to get down on your knees.
Is it 4,000 now? If you,
Yeah, but they're not all Canadian.
I'll take it.
Somebody in New Zealand, I hate to break this to you, they might not be that interested in the premiers.
I'm working on New Zealand.
They might not know what the premiers are. But you never know. Some people are quite curious about the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. So that's what you do. You can recommend other people's books. You can put out events that are going to happen or something that you might have enjoyed. I always tweet the Canadian Opera Company when I've been to it. Things like that.
Can you tell whether that actually helps them?
Oh, I know.
You know it does?
Well, I know that if you do a book that isn't very well known and it has a website, they will see a bump.
Oh, okay.
The people won't necessarily all buy their book, but they will all go and look at the website if it's a book that interests them. So you can do that. You can also ask for information. For instance, I found a very strange mushroom. So I couldn't find it anywhere in my mushroom lore books. So I took a picture of it and put it on Twitter and said, can anybody identify this? So typically you might get 50 answers. 40 of them will be jokes, like something I found in the bottom of my socks, stuff like that. Ha ha ha, LOL. So a lot of jokes, and then you'll get some wrong guesses. And then finally you will get the right one. And I did get the right one.
Bravo.
A lot of jokes, some wrong guesses, and the right one.
And the right one.
Yeah.
I want to make a bit of a hard turn here because I suspect that this audience has followed the controversy surrounding the radio host on whose show you have appeared several times.
That's true.
And I think they want to know, first and foremost, did you ever have any inkling that there was this aspect to Jian Ghomeshi's life?
Well, first of all, I'm not in the age group that he favored. Second, I'm not a blonde. And third, I'm quite athletic. So I don't think he ever took on any shot putters or, long distance canoers or any people who might sock him in the nose. So I never had such an experience. The only inkling that I had was from people in the younger generations, of which there are many, the many younger generations. A new one comes along every year. It's frightening. People quite a lot younger than myself who were not specific. They just said, we hear he's creepy. Now, creepy can cover a lot of things. So they never said what kind of creepy. Therefore, I was just as shocked as just about everybody else, I think.
Do you think anything positive has come out of this whole disastrous situation?
I think it's facilitated much more open discussion of these kinds of events and given an indication of how exactly numerous, of how widespread this kind of behavior can be when people think they can get away with it or are pathologically inclined. So I think it's opened up that discussion a lot. And here I have to say on behalf of my high school class, I could not imagine any of those fine lads, the kinds of boys I went out with in high school. They would never have thought of doing anything like that. I just know it wasn't part of the culture at that time.
Maybe women today now, as a result of this, feel they have license to actually put this
I think
issue out there?
feel they have license to at least put up their hands in response to a hashtag called "Been Raped, Never Reported." Mm-hmm. And a lot of them have talked back to the subject of why didn't you go to the police? So we've had quite a good look at what happens to a very large number of people who do go to the police. And that is partly because you have to be able to prove something like that, and something like that is often very hard to prove. So in our justice system, you have to be able to make a case. You can't just revert to the days of the Salem witchcraft trials and say, Steve's a witch. You can't do that. You have to demonstrate, you have to make your case, and it's hard to make.
The story seems to have morphed as it has emerged, first with his transgressions, and then to a discussion about sexual harassment in the workplace, and then even more so to the examples on Parliament Hill of two Liberal
we
members.
don't even know what happened. We've got no idea. Maybe you know more than I do.
No, but this was going to be my question. We don't know what happened. They don't know what they're accused of. Their political careers are now over.
I wouldn't say that.
No?
I would absolutely not say that.
Well, they can't run as Liberals next time. That's what
Who
the leader of the party.
Okay, so you've got more information on this than I have. It depends whether, did they all go into a room and they said, yes, we did it? We don't even know that.
No.
We don't even know what it was. We're really very much in the dark.
I guess the bigger question then becomes, does it concern you that we seem to be in a place in our culture today where it's trial in the court of public opinion and you are automatically guilty right away, and it doesn't really matter what happens in court because this courtroom, public opinion
Sometimes
courtroom...
yes, but then it can change its mind. which it did very quickly around the Jian Gumeshi thing. So first everybody said, oh, such a fine lad, couldn't possibly do anything like that, and naughty, naughty, bad women accusing him. And then some of them came forward, and then a lot of them came forward, and it switched like that. So I think it absolutely can change course, but this is not new. De Tocqueville in Democracy in America actually noticed that, recorded that in the early 19th century. So trial by public opinion, and anybody who's lived in a small town knows this already. Social media doesn't create totally new things. It takes things we're already doing and amplifies them. So the other moment in North American time when we've been here was during the Salem witchcraft trials. And the kinds of rules of evidence they accepted at that time meant that once you were accused, you were pretty much going to be found guilty, because they accepted something called the rule of spectral evidence, which meant if you were asleep in your bed with witnesses and somebody else saw you in a barnyard 10 miles away, that proved you were a witch, because it meant you could throw your specter. And there was no way of disproving that. And the other one was piece of evidence. So I'm a possessed person, I'm being tormented by witches, and you're the accused. I touch you and then go into a fit. Think about that for a minute. And then think about the fact that if you were found guilty, you got off being hanged by accusing other people.
There's a vicious circle for you.
Very vicious,
Yeah.
Extremely. A lot like communist show trials and under Stalin.
Let me ask you about another gentleman that Ashley actually mentioned in his introduction. And as I think about the list of people in Ontario's capital city who I would think you had very little in common with and would be unlikely to be a friend and supporter of, it's Conrad Black. And yet you guys have become quite friendly from what I have heard.
Yeah, the thing about Conrad is simply this. He was very sort of lavish and hospitable to a lot of people. I was not in that group. And then, as soon as he got in trouble, a lot of them turned on him quite viciously. And, were too good for the likes of him. That's number one. I found that unfair. Number two, it's by no means clear that he was guilty of that with which he was charged. It was a jury trial. And I think his manner, how shall we describe his manner?
Imperious?
That would
nice
be
way.
one adjective.
Yeah.
Yes. I think his manner got him into a lot of trouble with the jury. And he has been in the habit pretty much all his life of saying, how can anybody be so fatuous, as stupid as... I mean, he is quite fond of his own opinions. How shall we put that?
Okay.
And you can take objection to that, but you shouldn't put somebody in jail for that. So the people I've spoke to who are lawyers and judges in this country didn't think that he was going to be convicted at all. So that, I would put it down to that.
Are you impressed with him as an author?
I actually kind of am. The books are not short. But he does his research very thoroughly. You may not agree with the conclusions to which he comes, but you can't say he hasn't read the source material.
No, but he doesn't write books shorter than 1,200 pages, it seems.
Some people like those.
Okay.
In fact, somebody said to me in a bookstore today, when are we going to have a nice big fat novel?
Well, some people like those indeed, but Okay, I'm going to get in trouble for asking you this. Have you ever read one of his books?
Yes.
Which one did you read?
I read the Nixon one.
You read the Nixon one.
I read the Roosevelt one.
You did? Okay.
Yeah,
you know,
well,
he's
that was
got a
pretty
new one on the
interesting.
history of Canada.
And, yes, and I'll read that one too.
You will?
Well, it's about what really went on in 1867.
But have you ever recommended to him, you know, Conrad, you'd sell more and have more people reading if you just shortened them a little bit?
Have you ever tried to give him advice?
No, I have not. I have not. Very good point. Just on,
I mean, he could have, never mind. He didn't have to go through all of that. He could have gotten out of it very easily right at the beginning.
Well, and that raises another question, because you did do that book and documentary about debt, and I wonder if part of your sympathy for him relates to the fact that, unlike many others, he's actually paid his debt to society. He went to jail.
Yeah, but we're not even sure that he owed that. Or somebody else put it, you know, what Conrad was convicted for wasn't what he ought to have been convicted for. So
Okay.
it's still an open question in my mind. And anyway, so that's somebody looking back on it years from now and going all over it again. I bet they will come to much the same conclusion. But I have to say it made him into a much more educated and broader-minded Conrad. To go in there and actually hear the stories of some of these people and figure out the system, which he did pretty quickly. It's quite fascinating. I think he should write a memoir about that.
I do want to ask you about politics in the city in which you have lived.
Oh, no!
Yes, ma'am. Because I know this will leave you crestfallen and brokenhearted, but Rob Ford's only going to be mayor of Toronto for another 2 weeks. And Doug Ford is only going to be on Toronto City Council for another 2 weeks. And then there's a new mayor coming in. And I just wonder what your view of that is.
Well, no. I did not accept any of the invitations that I had to run as mayor of the city of Toronto. I think it would be fun to run and horrible to actually have to do it. So I'm filled with admiration for people who will undergo 4 years of being on a city council. It's really even if you think they're in it for nefarious reasons, suppose they're not in it for nefarious reasons, it's really public service. So that's one thing. The other thing was they lost their grip over the library's issue.
They lost their grip because of you.
No, not because of me. It's because people in Toronto loved their library system, and it's, I think, the second most used in North America, the first most used being New York, which is a bigger city.
You should take a step back and remind everybody what transpired. Because
Okay, what
it was
transpired
you
is
and
this.
Doug who had the confrontation.
Yeah, well, I didn't even have a confrontation with him. He had a confrontation with me, all on his lonesome, over in a corner somewhere. So what happened was, he said he was trying to get people to vote to cut the libraries. And he said, my constituency has more libraries than it has Tim Hortons. Wrong by 13. There's more Tim Hortons.
There were more Tim Hortons
Oh
than
yeah,
libraries.
way more.
Okay.
Way more. And I would cut them in a heartbeat.
He said.
An eye blink, yes, a heartbeat, an eye blink, one of those, one or the other, hearts or eyes. The library workers then, of course, got understandably upset and put out a petition to people to support the libraries. So being on Twitter and having a mere 200,000 or something at that time, I retweeted the petition a couple of times, and I'm sorry to say I made some jokes.
Do you remember them?
No, not much. I think I coined the term the twin Ford mayors, or the twin Ford mayor. Mm-hmm. They were kind of welded at the hip. Mm-hmm. And so many people then piled onto the petition that it crashed. The website crashed. Then that became a news story, microphone. What do you think of that, Doug Ford? Whereupon he said, Margaret Atwood, who's she? I wouldn't know her if I passed her on the street.
He really said that. He really said that.
If she wants to have an opinion, she needs to get elected and come down to City Hall. So much for your expression of your opinion in a democracy. You're not allowed to have it. unless you're in City Hall. So that went around the world viral everywhere, including English newspapers, etc. And at that moment, the libraries and City Hall were both inundated with an inpouring of letters, messages, emails. They said they'd never seen anything like it. And the people who had been in the middle on City Council, I think, realized that if they voted to cut the libraries drastically, all of those people were going to be on their front lawn at the next election. And that would be the moment they lost their iron grip on City Council. So it was not I. I was the lightning rod, maybe.
Well, you were the catalyst.
Of just a catalyst. If there had been nothing to catalyze, nothing would have happened. It was the extent to which people use the library, all kinds of people, all age groups, all immigrant people, older people, young families. It was very, very heavily used.
What did Doug Ford not get about that?
I don't think he had ever been in a library. And I don't think he got it that the same people that drank coffee in Tim Hortons were quite frequently also the people who used the library. There weren't two distinct groups there. So he I think also had the idea that real solid, good, solid little guys weren't interested in books, which is not true. So they just didn't get any of that. But you don't know this part because it's not public. But I suppose it will be now. I was at an arts supporting type of party, and out from behind a potted palm leapt Doug Ford.
So you have met him?
Best of buddies. No hard feelings, Margaret. Get picture taken. I thought, oh my goodness, I've just been co-opted. So
you have met him?
I have now, yes.
And was it just that photo op, or did you actually have a conversation with him?
He said I should come and have coffee with him.
Did you take him up on it?
No.
Oh,
now
should?
I know a pickup line when I see one. No, I don't know what we would have discussed, but...
Oh, you should, and you should let me come and watch. Come on, that would be good.
No, I mean, first of all, the Fords aren't stupid, just because they have this act that they put on. They've done some awfully stupid things, but they're not inherently dumb, number one. Number two, whatever you want to say about Rob, he knew how to connect with people on the street.
Absolutely.
So I was never a person who wrote them off or any of that. And when all of this addictive behavior came out, my only thing that I had to say about it is this is a person who needs help. If he's been doing it that long, a couple of weeks in rehab is not going to fix it for him.
I wonder what you think about the prospect, because Doug Ford did get more than 300,000 people to vote for him, even though he didn't win. If he could marshal 10% of that support and get that 10%, 30,000 people, to join the Ontario Conservative Party, which has 10,000 members, he could become the next Ontario PC Party leader. Your thoughts on that?
I think I'll jump that ditch when I come to it.
He could do it.
Yeah, he could. People vote. If that's who they want, then they'll vote for him. We remember Mike Harris. Not entirely happy story. So you just have to decide who do you want representing you? What sort of thing do you want? I think the caveat would be he needs to start getting his facts straight and understanding that people are going to call him on it when he doesn't tell the truth. And I think a lot of it isn't deliberate lying. I think he just hasn't looked. It's like the libraries. I just don't think he looked. He had an opinion. It was out his mouth. And he didn't do the groundwork.
I'm going to ask whoever it is who has all the questions from the audience to bring those pages up as I ask one more question to you, and then we'll let the audience in on this. I'd like to know what your hopes and expectations, thank you, are for John Tory, who's about to become the new mayor of Ontario's capital city, and a guy I assume you know a little bit.
No, I don't. Not very well, but I know people who know him.
Have you met him?
Have I met him? You know, you ask me these questions. Have I met him? Have I met him? Maybe.
That's so funny, because I think politically you two are very similar.
Well, you think so?
Yeah. Well, if I may say, you're both red Tories, I think, aren't you?
I suppose.
Yeah.
The thing about him is he did put in the groundwork. He's done a huge amount of community service. He is not the most, let's say that he will probably not make the kinds of headlines that Rob made, and that could be a good thing. Mm-hmm. But let me quote Bill Davis, who was one of the most successful premiers that this province has had in the mid-20th century. A very successful guy, and people said to him, "Why are you so bland?" And he said, "Bland works."
Yep, best quote ever. Okay, let's get into these questions here. What is your best memory of doing the cartoon strip for this magazine?
What's my best memory of it? So the best. Do you know what this cartoon strip was? Okay, I will help you out on that.
Let's do the background.
Okay,
yes.
So in the 70s, there still is a magazine called This Magazine, and I knew some of the people who were running it. And at that moment in time, the cultural nationalists were actually opposed to the liberals of that moment, because the liberals were continentalists and were not much interested in supporting culture. The early support for culture in this whole saga came from conservatives. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I had a cartoon strip that I ran in This Magazine, which was otherwise sometimes thought of as a lefty magazine, but it started out as being about education. But my cartoon strip was called Canadian Culture Comics, and the hero of it was a superhero called Survival Woman. Mm-hmm. So, like Superman, she had a cape, but unlike Superman, being Canadian, she couldn't fly. She had snowshoes instead. So she did a lot of sitting on the curb, going like this. But she had some other people in the strip. For instance, there was a 70s feminist character called Woman.
Woman.
Okay. You know, like Wonder Woman, only
Mm-hmm.
it was double. Woman. So what is my best memory of it? I don't know. We got quite a lot of input coming back in onto it. And we even made a line of greeting cards with this little figure on it as a fundraiser. What am I supposed to say? It was fun.
Good. Okay.
Yes, it was fun. It was fun.
Have you published anything anonymously or with pseudonyms that you are now willing to reveal?
No.
Not, okay. A question about the opera with Orlan, Nylon, and Dacron. How many of them died?
None.
None of them died?
No, it was a happy opera. Okay, so the reference here, long before you were born, I made a wrong turn in high school. I didn't take typing and secretarial sciences. I should have done, then I would know how to type. But as it is, I still have to look. So instead of that, I took home economics. And the reason I took home economics was that in our guidance textbook in 1952, there were a lot of future careers for men, and there were 5 for women. Let's name them off. Nurse, public school teacher,
Sure.
airline stewardess, that's what they were called then, secretary, and home economist. So I did not wish to be any of those, but having been brought up by Depression-era parents and then gone through the war, I was always led to believe that I would have to earn my living. Nobody ever said to me, get a negligee, lounge around on a sofa, and some millionaire is going to come and propose. You know, nobody ever said that to me. Don't know why.
It's a good
So
thing.
I always had jobs, and I was quite entrepreneurial in high school. The home economics opera was not the only thing I did in that age. So I took home economics because of all those 5 things, they made the most money. I was quite mercenary. So there I was, and then I realized that I didn't want to be that at all. I wanted to be a writer. But there I was in the fourth year of home economics, and we could do a special project. In fact, we had to do a special project. And the teacher, quite wrongly, and this is the peril of democracy, she let us vote on what that special project was going to be. And I'm sorry to say that I subverted the class and steered them away from making these stuffed animals, which she had in mind. I knew about those curved seams. I didn't want to go there. and got them to vote on the home economics opera. And she was a person of no sense of humor. His hobby was skiing. And she had to accept it, but she said it had to really be about home economics. So it was. It was about 3 princesses called Orlan, Nylon, and Dacron who lived in a castle with their parent called Old King Coal, C-O-A-L, because they were all coal tar derivatives. And then we opened with a song about Wash Day, sung to the tune of Hoffman's Barcarolle, which when I sung it to the head of the Canadian Opera Company in an elevator, his response was that I had ruined Hoffman's Barcarolle for him forever.
Do you want to sing some of it now?
I don't think so. Maybe later. Well, we can vote on that. Anyway, so then along came the hero, whose name was Sir William Woolley, and he had a problem, which was he shrank from washing.
And everybody lived happily ever after.
No, there's more.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes, he got married to Orlan, and they produced a blend. Which had the benefits of both fabrics.
Yes, of course.
And people who were in this opera still turn up from city to city, and they can still sing the songs. There are photos of this. There's proof.
I hesitate
He doesn't
to ask
believe
this
me.
next question because it gives away the ending of your current book.
It does?
Yeah, so
The ending of my current book. I mean, the one I'm writing or the one that just got published?
Oh, Stone Mattress, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Oh, just that
take
story.
a look.
Okay.
Take a look at this, and if you don't want to give away the ending,
the
no, don't
opening-
say it out loud because then
Okay.
you want people to buy the book and not know the ending. You want to answer that, or should we move on?
No, that's fine.
Yeah, you're okay with it?
No,
Okay.
nobody will know what they're talking about, so it's okay.
Okay.
So Stone Mattress, 9 Tales, and the title story is actually a murder story, in which somebody gets murdered with a 1.9 billion year old stromatolite, which I have in my kitchen. I got to bring it home. So that's the title story. But in the first 3 stories. The first 3 stories are connected, and they concern 2 women and 1 man who long ago in the early 60s had, shall we say, a dramatic triangle. So one of the women stole that man from the other woman, and then they all meet up at that man's funeral.
And the question is, in the opening stories of the Stone Mattress, characters reconciled at the end. Is that a new kind of ending for you? No. No, not quite. Okay.
I think there's probably a bit more reconciliation in this book than there have been in some others, but there's also a bit more murder.
Okay. In Surfacing Place, in Surfacing, Place played an important part in the story, i.e. Northern Ontario. To what extent is place important in your writing?
Northern Quebec. Cross the river. Same kind of thing, though.
Okay.
Yes. Glacial scrape, granite-based boreal forest. mixed, deciduous, coniferous, that kind of thing. So place is always very important to me. In fact, it's very hard for me to write about a place that I've never been to. I like to be able to visualize it. And even the ones that are set in the future, they are set in a particular location.
Anybody who remembers The Handmaid's Tale will remember the name of this character. And the question simply is, what happened to of Fred?
Of Fred. Well, we don't know that. It's in the text that we actually don't know. And that happens to people in history quite a lot. If you're researching historical subjects, unless they're Napoleon or somebody, in which case we did know, they go along for a while and then they just fall off the page. They disappear, you can't trace them. That happened to the real Grace Marks in the Alias Grace novel, which was about a real person who either did or didn't participate in a double murder. We never actually found that out either. And she gets let out by Sir John A. Macdonald, in point of fact, who declared a general amnesty for certain kinds of prisoners when Confederation took place. And at that point, she was driven across into the United States by the warden, and she disappears. We're not able to trace her after that. I can only assume that she changed her name, as one would, and disappeared into the general populace, because she was quite well known. She was quite notorious, so that's probably what you would do. So Offred disappears in a similar way. We have a record of what happened to her. We have her version of events up to a certain point in time, and then she just disappears from the record.
You mentioned Sir John A. in the midst of that answer, and I actually want to do an ad-lib follow-up on Sir John A. It's his 200th birthday, coming up in January. If we were in the United States right now and it was George Washington's 200th birthday, the place would be going nuts. There's a little bit happening in Canada, some groups trying to bring some attention to him. I wonder how important do you think he is as a figure in Canadian history today?
Well, I think he's very important, but it wasn't just him. Mm-hmm. In the Canadian way, he had to reach a consensus. So he had to get everybody on the same page and put together some pretty disparate interests. So George Washington gets the big celebration because he was an army, he was the leader of the victorious army. Yeah. But that is not what Sir John A. did. What he did was get everybody to agree on something, which in Canada, you know, that's not always so easy.
No kidding.
He managed to pull it off. And I think we tend to celebrate the event rather than just one person. And we also tend to celebrate group activities that we consider admirable. We make a big deal out of Remembrance Day. I was down in the States on Remembrance Day, and I was wearing my poppy, and nobody there does that. They don't wear poppies. So they were looking at me in elevators and saying, "Oh, Canadian." Those who knew about poppies.
When I was a kid, Remembrance Day was not a big deal at all. We were going through a phase where it just was not cool to be associated with that.
What year was that?
Well, you know how old I am. I told you earlier.
Yeah, but I can't do math.
Okay, well,
let me count backwards.
In the 1960s. I was a kid in the 1960s.
Yeah, okay, that figures.
Nowadays, it's what figures?
Well, no, it figures that in the 1960s they would think that it was militaristic or something.
Today, it's obviously a huge deal, and people participate in it in ways that they haven't in a half a century. Which do you prefer?
Well, it was a huge deal when I was in school. Very, very big deal, because it was so close to the end of the war.
Right.
So I'm old enough that I can actually remember being at VE Day.
May 845. Really?
It's a 46, I think, no?
VE Day? 45. May 845.
VJ Day 46, right. Yeah. That's right.
What grade would you have been in then?
We didn't have kindergarten then because of the war. So had there been kindergarten, I would have been in it. But as it was, I was in Miss Pickering's tap dance class.
Okay, I see. And do you prefer what we've now recaptured with Remembrance Day as opposed to the way it was in the 60s when it was not cool at all?
Well, nobody of my generation is likely to have dubious thoughts about celebrating people who fought in the Second World War. That's very unlikely to happen. And indeed, I have been to the Normandy beaches. I've done all of that. In fact, I've done it twice. You can also get little booklets that tell you, that walk you through World War I and tell you where to drive to, where to stand, take 6 giant steps, turn to the left, and now you're at the exact spot where, and then they will tell you what happened there. So it's a huge, huge part of our history because it rearranged so many people's lives. And also, for a lot of people, it was their first encounter with the wider world. So the casualty rate was huge, and that's another thing that distinguishes us from the United States. They didn't go in until 1918. They're right at the end.
Right. So
that huge loss, that isn't something they associate with World War I. Mm-hmm. The other thing about Canada was that because it was the regimental system, regiments were raised from a town and surrounding area, and they would go into an action all together. And so the town would receive the telegram, just about everybody they knew had been wiped out. So I don't think we're much more like England in that respect. The way in which it rearranged families and the demographics of this country. Same World War II. And a lot of what happened to me with World War II is that a lot of the guys that came back, you could go to university for nothing. So they all went to university, and they were quite obstreperous, as you might expect. They were grown-ups. They didn't just sit there and absorb things. They talked back, they argued, and when they weren't doing that, they were out drinking and carrying on. And when my generation then came along in the 50s, we were told, "You're so dull." The professors would much rather have had the vets back because they were so much more interesting than we were.
A couple of more questions. This one's long. What is going on in Toronto? Why does a city which hardly supports its CFL team, the Argonauts, want an NFL team? As a cultural commentator on things Torontonian and Canadian, can you shed some light on how Toronto sees itself within the Canadian, North American, and Western world contexts?
Wow. Okay, CFL and NFL. I think the CFL almost disappeared from view, but then it got pulled back together.
You know by who?
I did know that, but...
John Tory.
Yeah, there you are, among others.
Yep.
As I say, it's never just one person
Right.
in Canada, it's always a group effort.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. And I have a special attachment to the CFL because it was right after a playoff game of the CFL in 1939, November. My mother waited until the game was over. The doctors thanked her.
This is at Varsity Stadium?
No, it was in Ottawa.
Oh, in Ottawa,
The
okay.
Rough Riders, remember them?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Lansdowne Park.
Yeah, so there you are. I, of course, would be a CFL supporter, but people get continentalist, and also they think they can make money if they join a larger league. I'm also a person who probably thinks that hockey got too widespread, too many teams, and that some of these standards went somewhat downwards. Because you were playing to audiences that wanted to see fights.
So you can't name the starting lineup for the Florida Panthers, is what you're saying?
Among other things, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Here's, actually, we'll do one more question, then you come up and finish us off, as it were. This is, okay.
You better rethink that.
You are driving a car when you spot a mother duck in one lane and 3 baby ducklings in the other. Which lane do you choose?
There's only 2 lanes.
Apparently. That's the question. You're driving a car, you spot a mother duck in one lane and 3 baby ducklings in the other lane. Which lane do you choose?
Okay, who's behind me and who's in front of me when
Well,
I'm
the
driving
ducklings
this
are in
car?
front of you. I don't know who's. I don't know who's behind you.
You don't?
No.
Okay, so it's not the question about do you screech to a halt and cause a big car crash by saving the ducks. It's not that question.
Well, freelance away.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that is a question with a hidden agenda.
Speaking of agendas,
So it depends whether you want to put your
I would like in this. The agenda's been on TVO for 9 years.
congratulations.
Thank you. No, I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it for that reason. I'm asking, how many times have you been on the program in 9 years?
I think we had this conversation and you said none.
That is correct.
And I said I had the impression that I had been on it, and you said that was just us having a conversation in the foyer. And I said, well, I must have been kind of like being on it.
Yes, you were in the building one day, and we bumped into each other, and we had a lovely conversation, but it was not televised. I'm all about the television. So, I think in front of this vast audience, you need to make a commitment in honor of your 75th birthday that you're going to appear on the agenda sometime this season.
But have you proposed yet?
I am proposing now.
Okay.
Is it a deal?
Yes.
It's a deal. Margaret Atwood.
Thank you both very, very much. Actually, in honor of your birthday, we have a member from our Alumni Association Board of Directors, Dee Rhoda, who's going to come up and give you a special birthday gift.
Oh, no. Oh, really? What is it?
Regarding that duck and the ducklings, Steve, maybe she's riding her bicycle.
Oh.
I don't know.
Very good. Very good.
Chancellor Paikin and distinguished guests and Laurentian University alumna, Margaret Atwood. I have to admit I'm pretty humbled and excited at the same time being up here. Dear guests, for several years the event proceeds have gone to support the Margaret Atwood Scholarship at Laurentian University, I believe since 2011. To date, 6 students have received this scholarships, and these students have pursued degrees in science, communication, and English. Now, while funds remain in the scholarship account, without proceeds generated from future Atwood events, the scholarship fund will eventually deplete. No future events means the award fund will one day dry out. It's with excitement and pleasure to announce on this festive occasion, Margaret, the Laurentian University Alumni Association's incredible investment of $10,000. This investment will ensure that the Margaret Atwood Scholarship continues to benefit Laurentian University students in perpetuity. The gift is made on behalf of all the members of Laurentian University Alumni Board of Directors, as well as all the entire alumni community. Margaret, you are a member of our family. Félicitations et bonne fête à vous. Merci.
Wonderful.
I know you're all itching to sing happy birthday, but before... Oh, she's not here. Oh, well, who's going to lead happy birthday, Shannon? Me! Oh, for God's sake. Well, can at least I thank people? No. So, what's happening? You can't sing your own happy birthday, can you? Well, just
Steve can
I'd like
do
to
it.
thank people first, and then we can do it. Is it okay, Mom? We were planning to thank a bunch of people, so just stand by before I can't sing, but anyway, we'll see how that. Oh my God! Don't tell my wife. We'd like to thank a bunch of people. Is there anybody here who can sing?
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Margaret. Happy birthday to you.
I just thanked our Chancellor again. I'd like to thank a few other people before we depart for the evening. We'd like to thank Huntington, Thornhill Universities, the City of Greater Sudbury, McClellan and Stewart, and the Demerara Library, all have contributed financially to this event. We also want to thank our supporters in the President's Office, the Chief of Staff, the Department of English, the Media Centre, our Living with Lake Centre and Development Office, as well as Marketing and Communications. We need to thank our organizers. This is important. We need to thank our organizers, Evan Bates and Giselle Pageau, as well as Sherry Drysdale, who are all with us tonight. We need to thank our promoters, Marcus Schwabe and the CBC, our ticket sellers, Susie at reception, the Old Walk Roastery, and Chapters. We also want to thank Chapters for selling books after the event, and Amy Adam of the English Department for helping out with ticket sales and book signing. To wind up. These dinners were originally conceived by Dr. Susan Glover of our English department, who got inspired after attending a birthday party held in honor of Robert Burns. Each year around January the 25th, the anniversary of Burns' birthday back in 1759, fans get together to enjoy haggis, Scotch whiskey, and the recitation of his poetry. The first Atwood birthday party began in 2004 in Shannon Hengen's house, and she and Dr. Glover have been integral to the success of the event ever since. I'd like the two of them to come up on stage, and we're going to give them a little presentation of thanks.
Well done.
Thank you, guys. Do you want to say anything? Okay, one last little thing. Just because we'll no longer be involved doesn't mean the tradition must stop, and they invite each of you to pick up the torch. Next year, on around November the 18th, remember that's the day before World Toilet Day, when Miss Atwood turned 76, wouldn't it be wonderful to join close friends in your home in celebration of that day? And if you like birthday cake, this would be an extra excuse for you to have some. The challenge is before you. Finally, after this event, which we'll be dispersing shortly, some of you will be wanting to get Margaret Atwood to sign your books. So here's the drill. What a way to end, how to sign books. Fill out a Post-it note to be distributed in the lobby with your name or the name of the person you'd like the book dedicated to. Don't write a long little description that you'd like her to fill in, please. Just your name and the person you want to dedicate it to. And if you have more than 3 books, would you kindly get to the back of the line to allow others to go through more quickly? And on that happy note, I thank you enormously for coming, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Please thank Ashley Thompson for being our MC for forever and doing such a wonderful job.